is a goose, a 10-pound beauty, all dark meat, wonderful flavor, and you don't have to roast it whole. You can cut it all up, simmer it in wine, serve it with a delicious sauce. See how to ragu a goose today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to the French Chef. You know, I like the idea of a ragoût. And a ragoût is just another fancy French word for a stew or a fricassee. It just means you take cut up meat and you brown it and then you simmer it in a delicious sauce. It's just like a coq au vin, that's a chicken in red wine, or like a bœuf bourguignon, the beef burgundy stew in red wine, in which it's garnished, in that case, with little onions and mushrooms, and it's absolutely delicious. You can cut up a goose and do it that way. Just substitute goose for chicken or beef in the recipe. But we're going to do a white wine stew that it's called a ragoût d'oie au chou. And oie is goose and chou is cabbage. And it's a very nice dish, and I think you're going to like it. And I'm going to put off my little sample ragoût, and we're going to get going. If you did the goose in red wine rather than white, you could call it a goose au vin à la bourguignonne, rather than a ragoût au vin blanc, the way this is going to be. And now we have this 10-pound goose, and usually, unless you have a goose on your farm, you buy them frozen. And to defrost them, just follow the package directions. And this one is 10 pounds, and 9 to 10 pounds is the best size. And after your goose is all defrosted, you then, the first thing you do is to take out the fat and the giblets, of which there is quite a bit. There's lots of fat, which is all attached to the back end, or the vent as it's politely called. And you want to save all of this fat because it's wonderful to render. And then, it doesn't seem to have, I guess for some reason it doesn't have any neck and giblets, but that's all right because it does always have the liver. And speaking of liver, I would like you to see a fresh foie gras. Here's a picture of a fresh foie gras, and as you see, that's in my hand. You can see the difference. Here's a small lobe, and when it's a real foie gras, it's as big as my whole hand. And there's the large lobe, which is about 7 inches long, from there to there. And the geese in France, in the foie gras country, are raised just for their livers. And that's why you can often buy goose by the piece, which you can't here. But the first thing that you want to do is to chop off the wing ends, because I'm going to get rid of that photo. As you look at this wing, you see it's enormous, but it's only the upper part that has any meat on it. And so you want to chop that off. Whang. And then you save that, put it into your stock pot. Because everything that you save from the goose, you can turn into a marvelous soup. And now, the second thing you do is you take a very small, sharp knife and you slit the goose right down the backbone. There's the front of the goose and there's the tail. And take a very sharp little stubby, tough knife like that and just cut right down there. And then what we're going to do now is to take off the wings and the wings and the legs on each side. There's extra neck skin. Chop that off and have another pan and put all the fat and fatty skin in the other pan. And that is for rendering the fat. Now I'm going to do So I'm not going to do the whole goose. It would take too long, but I'm going to show you on an already partially cut goose what we're going to do. There's the big leg, and there's the wing. And that's where the wing came from, and that's where the leg came from. And see, there's the ball joint that attaches the wing to the shoulder. And also, as you notice with this wing, I've taken off a little bit of piece of the breast along with the wing to make a better serving. And there's your second joint and your leg. So, I'm going to now start. You want to take the wings and legs off first so that you can get at the breast. So with the wing, start, right? You can feel the shoulder blade at the back with your hand. Take your knife and cut up in a shallow semicircle, taking away a bit of the breast right up to the shoulder. And it's a very good idea to learn how to, if you want to learn how to carve well, learn how to cut up raw poultry, because then you know exactly where all the joints are. And just keep scraping down. I think you'll find as soon as you get the goose in front of you and know what you're doing, you'll find it's not difficult. Now here again, what you're looking for is that ball joint that attaches the wing to the shoulder. Now here you have the leg. And again, you start at the back. And as you remember, there are always little oysters of meat at the small of the back. There's the small of your back there. So get that out first. And then there's your knee and slit. Lifting up the knee, slit the skin. And you're raising up the thigh and the leg at the same time. And then here again, there's your ball joint right there. Bend that, and then cut along the back of the carcass toward the tail to get that other nut of meat off. So you can see that it's just bending out. But if you're carving a whole roast duck at the table, if you can do it this way, you're pretty smart. So there we are. And that's where it fit on. But I think if you try it, even the first time, as long as you know where the joints are, you'll find that it's not too difficult. And now we have the breast. And I'm going to use some poultry shears or heavy scissors of any kind and just cut. Sometimes rather tough. That bone sticking out there, I'll get at later. I'll just cut through the rib cage. On one side, and then cut through the rib cage on the other to where the meat is. Never find that these poultry shears are very sharp. Now there's the breast and carcass, and just bend it. Pull it off. There. And you have these two tusks, and you chop them off. Those are shoulder blades. Hard to believe, really, but that's what they are. And then all of this, just take your carcass and whack it all up, and put that into your soup pot. And then here is your breast, and you want to cut that off. And this depends on how you decide you want to do it. Here's extra skin, and you have to cut that. I like to cut it. It's a great big thing. I like to cut it lengthwise. This is a big French cleaver called a feuille, a fendre, or a leaf to whack. Now part of it's come apart. Tant pis. Now there are the two those two pieces, halves of the breast. There's bits of fat, see skin, I put in the fat thing. Now these have to be cut in half, and I can't use my feuille because something's missing from it. But you have to put it skin side down. If you put it, if you put it bone side down, it bounces, and I always cut it at a slight angle. But this, when you get to the breast part, you're on your own and can do it any way you like. This is a big knife I call a whacker, and it's just for whacking things in half. Now here we have a display of pieces. There are 4 pieces of breast, and we have 2 pieces of leg and 2 pieces of wing. And the pieces of legs, that's 1, 2, that's 8 pieces. But we can separate the second joint from the drumstick, and that'll give us 10 pieces. And a goose this size will serve 8 to 10 people. So if you can locate with your finger where the ball joint connects the leg, cut through it. And if you can't quite locate it, just whack through it. Sometimes you get it at the first try and sometimes not. But there you have your drumstick and all of your second joint, which is certainly, I won't do that one. I'm really doing somewhat just of a token here. And now, this is one reason I think the ragu is good, because you can get rid of all this fatty skin. Look at all the fat there. That's about, heavens, almost half an inch of fat. And so if you just peel it off, take your little sharp knife and scrape, aiming your knife toward the skin. Now see, look at how very fat that is, and now here's your piece that's really, you can take every vestige of fat off, so save all of that. When you get to the leg, see there's a lot of fat right in there. You may not want to peel all the skin off, but you can peel quite a bit of it off. I'm not going to do all of this. I just wanted you to see how it worked, but you can peel everything. And when you get through, you're so slippery. When you got through, you have 3.5 pounds of fat and fatty skin pieces, and you have about 2.25 pounds of carcass and wing ends and scraps. And here is your meat. You have about, well, really less than 4 pounds of meat. But you're paying for all of this, so you might as well use it. Render the fat and turn the scraps into soup stock, because it makes a delicious soup. So now you're ready to cook the goose. But I think you'll find that after you cut up a number of birds that it goes very quickly. And again, I'm not going to cook the whole goose. What I mainly want to do is to give you the idea of how it's done. And you first salt and pepper very lightly. Pepper, that's a pepper grinder. And then flour. And then turn it over and do the same thing. And you do this just before you're going to cook it. I never like to shake things in a paper bag with flour. It seems, I don't know, it seems too ladies' magazine-y to me. I don't like it. But that's just my peculiarity. Now there's a little salt on the other side. And pepper again. And flour. If you do this ahead of time, it gets gummy. So you just do this just at the last minute, just before you're ready to saute. I have about, heavens, maybe 2/3 of a goose here. One nice thing is too, if you've got a frozen goose and you don't want to cook all of it, you can have it cut in half by the butcher with this big buzzsaw, and then you can freeze one half, the one that's still frozen, and then you can cook the other half, so that you don't have to have 8 or 10 people to eat your goose. Now we're going to brown it first, and here is goose fat that has been rendered. So it makes a marvelous sautéing fat, and here these little pieces of goose fat which have turned into what's known as cracklings. And so you want a big frying pan and film it by about 1/16 inch with goose fat, and then brown the pieces of goose. Those are 2 pieces of breast. There's a wing. I've left a little bit of skin on that. And there's a leg with a little bit of skin on because it wasn't fatty. You can, if you wish, with a ragu like this, you can marinate the goose in wine and aromatic vegetables, just as we did, remember, a beef mode. You'd marinate it and then dry it off and flour it. And what you want to do is to turn it around and be very careful in sautéing it. You want the fat to be very hot but not burning, and you want the pieces of goose to be nicely browned but not blackened on all sides. And this is really the only part of cooking this kind of a thing where you have to be careful, and that you want to be sure that you brown it nicely and evenly and thoroughly. It'll take about 10 minutes. And while it's browning, you can go ahead and do something else right at the cooktop. Just keep turning and looking at it. And if you're doing a whole goose, you'd have 2 frying pans. You just do half of it at once, brown it nicely, put it aside, brown the other part. But the browning, one thing you see, after having taken the skin off, the flour coating protects the goose pieces, as well as giving them a little bit of crust and a little taste. Now we have, for the rest of the cooking, for the simmering, we have a little more goose fat in the pan, and then so many of these recipes start out with some little pieces of pork fat. If you're doing a whole goose, you want a whole cup. In this case, we just want about half a cup of little diced blanched salt pork, blanched, boiled 5 minutes to get the water out. And then you want to cook that. This is very reminiscent of, remember when we did our gratin de morue, our wonderful codfish dish, started out exactly this way. It's rather typical of cooking in eastern France around Alsace and so forth. They use a great deal of lard and onions. And then about 3 cups of onions. If you're using a whole goose, you'd use about 5 or 6 cups of sliced onions. And then you cook that covered for, about 10 minutes until it is nicely brown and looks like this. It's not really, it's limp, and then it can be just beginning to brown a little bit. I'll let that cook a little more here. And then at the same time, you can start your cabbage. I'm going to see how my goose is doing here. Now the cabbage, I would call it a 6-minute cabbage. I've got about 4 or 5 cups of shredded cabbage in here. And then I want about 1/4 of a cup of stock. And this is stock made out of the goose. That's about 1/4 to 1/2 cup. And then I want 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 1/8 teaspoon of pepper. And that should be cooking higher there. And a bit of pepper. And then it doesn't need any more flavoring because it's going to get flavoring from the goose sauce. And this you can cook ahead and set aside. So now, when your goose is browned, in it goes with the onions and lardons. And these little lardons, you know, we're always blanching them. That's just to get the salt out of them or the preservative out. And this goose you would do a little more carefully than I have. But I've done it. It's done quite well, but I'm trying to do everything so you can see how to do it. And now we've got, say, 1/2 goose, so 1/2 bottle of white wine or about 2 cups of good dry white vermouth. And then you want some goose stock, just enough. You want enough liquid so that the goose is about 2/3 covered. And now we want flavorings. We want a 1/2 teaspoon of thyme about, and a 1/2 teaspoon of caraway. I think caraway is a very nice flavoring in there. And 2 bay leaves and some garlic. 2 or 3 cloves of garlic, just mashed up. Those are that's peeled garlic, and I've just, rather than putting it through a press, I'm doing a mince mash. Some little pieces that got off. And this is one of these recipes that is not, it's not sacred exactly what the proportions are, as long as you have 2/3 cup of liquid. I mean, that the liquid comes up not quite all the way to the top like this. Stir it around. And then there's a little bit of garlic that I missed. And then I think this is particularly because the goose was peeled, I like to protect it with a piece of waxed paper. And then after it comes up to the simmer on the stove, you want it to cook very, very, very slowly. It usually takes for a 9 to 10 pound goose like this, known as a young roasting goose, it takes about an hour and a half minimum of very, very slow cooking. And you can cook it either on the stove, on the top of the stove, or in the oven. And I'm going to cook it in the oven. Now I'm going to take one out and put one in. And if you cook it in the oven, let it cook at about 325, very, very slowly, because you don't want it to overcook. There's one in. Now I have the platter. I have a platter that's nice and warm with some noodles on it. I'm going to get my goose. See, there's the goose. And then the cabbage should be done. It smells good. I love cabbage. I have a good excuse for it, and I think this is as good as any. Now this is a platter with buttered noodles. And there's the goose. And the great thing about this is that there's practically no fat that you have to get off. So here, in this one, it has one or two carrots I put in. But arrange your pieces of goose over the noodles. going to put all of it on, well, I may. Now, here goes the cabbage on. You could serve the cabbage separate. I like to serve things all on the same plate if there's room, because I think it's more attractive. Though it's often difficult to get a big enough platter. Last time we were over in France, I got some down near Nice and sent them over. And then, if you feel it needs a little more decoration, the typical parsley garnish. You could put some in the middle, some on another end, and a little bit of the sauce over, and then serve the rest of the sauce in a warmed sauce boat. You've got yourself a really lovely dish there. And if you can do the goose ahead of time, but just keep it over hot water, just be very careful that you don't overcook it. There. I'm going to serve it to you so you can see how it goes. Look at this person is going to get a lovely big drumstick and a nice handful of noodles and some of this beautiful fresh cabbage, and then a little bit of your sauce on top. There you are. And as a wine, it's a good place to use your very best red Burgundy wine, like a Chambord Musigny or something like that, which goes beautifully with goose. And it just has a beautiful smell to it. And it's not that I have anything against roast goose. As a matter of fact, I love roast goose. But I think this is so much easier to serve. There's no stuffing and there's no trussing, and the cooking is simple. It's just a stew. And just look at how easy it is to serve. You just pick it up. There's no public carving. And it has a marvelous taste. So try it yourself, and then maybe you'll take my word for it. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation. Julia Child is co-author of Mastering the Art of French Cooking, Volumes 1 and 2.